Welcome to Yerushalmi Berachos, Daf Tesvav, and the Ozohadar print. I want to make a couple of introductory remarks about Daf Yomi itself, and then we'll get to hopefully three ha'aras on the blot, mostly focusing on the Pesach night where we say Hallel and some very fascinating stuff that we find. So firstly, let's just talk about the Daf Yomi cycle itself. Everyone pretty much knows that probably the originator of Daf Yomi was in El of 1923 by Rav Meir Shapiro, the very famous Rosh Yeshiva of Chachmei Lublin. He was a young man at the time, and there are those that say that he was influenced by Rav Moshe Menachem Mendel Spivak, who was part of Zeiri Agudas Yisrael, but I'll leave that for other historians and people to discuss. Certainly this concept, as I mentioned earlier, was around of learning a daf a day, and Rav Meir Shapiro is quoted by Rav Wosner as saying that he said he wasn't the originator, he was just someone that pushed for it, and that Ricky Vager learned with his Talmidim, and many people learned a blot a day. According to the standard Vilna Shas, which we've had since the 1500s, not the Vilna print, but that paginization, there's 2,711 pages in the Bavli, and it takes about 7 years and 5 months to learn. If you look at the cycle, it's pretty well defined, and we are in the 14th cycle, for those of you doing Daf Yomi in the Durham right now. When it comes to the Daf Yomi itself, very interestingly, Chavetz Chaim is one that really endorsed it, and within 1 month, it started on Rosh Hashanah of 1923. I heard this from Mendel Weinbach, and I've said it myself as well, maybe a little bit of a different version, so I hope I'm not misquoting him, but that two main things that came out of the 1923 Knesset Gdola were Daf Yomi and Beis Yaakov. And it's a very interesting thing because those two things are very significant in Klal Yisrael, and they've built Torah with a daily schedule, and also the women that understand Torah and support Torah and learn Torah, and it really has changed all of Klal Yisrael in the last basically 100 years. That being said, one of the great people that really supported Daf Yomi, that really helped to pick up, aside for the Chavetz Chaim, who really established it and said he was jealous of Rav Meir Shapiro, was the Ger Rebbe, Rav Avram Mordechai Alter. And since he learned that first blot of Berachos on Rosh Hashanah in front of everybody in public, that really created a storm of Daf Yomi. And it's very interesting because his descendant, in 1980, the Lev Simcha, who was also the Ger Rebbe in 1980 at the Knesset Gdola, he introduced the Yerushalmi Yomi. Now, this one's a little bit more complicated, and it's officially in the 11th cycle. Now, the actual Yerushalmi paginization, as I mentioned, there wasn't really a fully standard print, but the Vilna print, I think, was the most popular. It has about 1,500 pages, which takes about 4 years and about a month or so. The current print that I'm using right now, and that a lot of people have started using, divides the pages up much more, has a lot more pages. It has about 2,000 pages, and it's a 5.5 year cycle, basically. And that's the Ozohadar print. So I want you to recognize that. Like, for example, we're on Daf Tesvav right now in the Ozohadar print, but in the Vilna edition, that's Daf Yud, and the pages are much longer. Hopefully we'll talk about more about this in general, but also in the when we get to Shkalim, where there's different versions, and it affects the cycle of Daf Yomi as well, if you follow the Vilna print, etc. So, but what I want to say is that I'm not really sure why that decision was made. I don't know who it was based on. I certainly would have just followed the Vilna print, but I do very much appreciate what the Art Scroll and the Ozohadar print did as far as correcting things and really making it a lot more accessible. So I recognize it as well, but just recognize that this is the 11th Yerushalmi Yomi cycle. However, we're not going to finish it in time to start with 12th one according to when it was originally set up in 1980. So just recognize that, but it doesn't matter. The point is that a person should learn Yerushalmi and be familiar with it. And in today's blot, we're actually going to talk about that. So let me go through three main points. The first one is on Daf Tesvav Amud Aleph in this Ozohadar print. So there's a discussion of what do you say in Modim. If you look through it, we don't have a lot of this text. It's very interesting how Yerushalmi had a different version of Modim. In the Bavli, some of the stuff was used for Modim Derabanan, etc. So here, at the end of, just like in the end of the Bavli, where it talks about all the different versions for Modim, so there it says, Hilchach Nemer Lekula, you say all of it, and it's all pushed together as one text. So too, Rav Yudan says the same thing, that Noag and Rabbanan Amrin Kulhon, they adopted the text of all of it. So, and they put together all these shitas that were said. Just an interesting ha'ara about how Modim developed. I think most people are familiar with Avu Jerhom, that says that Modim Derabanan is there because you have to say thank you to Hashem directly. You can't just have a chazan saying it. And by the way, a lot of people try to find it, and they look, wait, is it in the Modim or is it in the Modim Derabanan? So you have to find it. I believe it's in the Modim Derabanan where he says it in the Avu Jerhom. Avu Jerhom is a great source for Yerushalmis being quoted. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is all the way at the end, just an interesting historical fact, which the Gemara talks about this, the Bavli also does, but Yerushalmi says that originally Rebbe, when he said Havdalah, so he would actually just say it as it came, as things happened, not necessarily on a coast and not necessarily together. Meaning he would want to use light, so he would make a bracha on the light. He would Shabbos is over, so he would say the Hamavdil bracha, and he would use Besamim. But then later, afterwards, v'chozer v'kol malakos, he would say malakos for everybody. There's a lot of interesting things about that because it seems to be saying that he would say it. Who is he saying for? His wife and daughters. This fits into the whole machlokes about whether you're allowed to make these brachos separately just for a spouse who is not yotze. Anyway, but that's just an interesting fact. What I want to focus on the rest of the time for today is just very fascinating historical things about the Pesach Seder. The Gemara is talking about the that a bracha smucha lechaverta, one bracha that comes immediately after another doesn't have to have a baruch in it, like Elokai Neshama. It starts with just words. It doesn't say Baruch Atah Hashem. We know that there's different brachas. Some of them are short, like Baruch Atah Hashem Echem Echlam Shah Kol Niyam B'Dvaro, or Asher Yatzar, that has two brachas in it, Baruch Atah Hashem, right, and then has another bracha at the end. And then there are some brachas that just start without a baruch, but they end with a bracha. So if I haven't lost you, I'm sorry if that's confusing. But basically, the Gemara implies a lot of things. One thing the Gemara says explicitly is that in its conversation, the Gemara says that that on Pesach night, basically they would make a bracha on Hallel before and after, which again is not necessarily everyone's minhag. But the Gemara says explicitly that on Pesach night they would say Hallel in shul. That the Yerushalmi holds clearly that's what they would do. And I want to just kind of talk about that a little bit. So if you look in Hilchos Pesach and Mishnah Berurah, Siman Taf Pei Zayin, so the Shulchan Aruch brings Belel Rishon Shel Pesach, Gomer Mahalo B'tzibor Ben Ima, which is very interesting lashon there, Bebracha Tchila V'sof. So you actually make a bracha on. That's what he says. V'chein Belel Sheni Shel Shnei Yom Tovim Shel Galios. And then the Ramah says Choza Einanu Noagin Kain Kainanu Omer Belayla B'Beis HaKnesses Hallel Klal. We don't say Hallel at all. That's the Ramah. And Mishnah Berurah says that's the halacha, but the Sfardim, they do say it. Just want to say that it's a famous thing that Igros Moshe talks about this in Orach Chaim Chelik Beis and in Tzadi Dalid, that Minhag Hagra in Eretz Yisrael, when his Talmidim came, they followed his Minhag, that he said this Hallel. He actually did. He poskened like the Beis Yosef. Rabbi Chil Michal Tukachinsky says that the Minhag Eretz Yisrael is to say it with a bracha, and that Rav Shmuel Salant, who was the chief rabbi of Yerushalmi, so he did that based on the Buchacher and based on this halacha and based on the Gra as well, and he brought down that the Chazan, in the case of Rav Shmuel Salanter, that the Chazan would say the bracha and be motzi everybody else. The Chazan Ish's minhag was that he would say it without the brachas, and the Grizz from Brisk, he didn't always follow the minhag Gra. Big conversation. I'm waiting for the Briskers to push back, but he basically followed the Ramah, that he did not make a bracha and he did not say Hallel. There's a whole shiloh in Igros Moshe about whether if you're in a tzibor that's saying it, whether you're allowed to leave, whether you're not allowed to leave. He says you can't. My question would be, if you have a basement minyan and there's different minhagim and there's kind of an understanding that not everybody's saying there what to do. But anyway, certainly in a shul, if you're part of an official shul and the shul says it, then a person should, seemingly according to the Igros Moshe, should stay there, because otherwise it's nicker, but he's not saying it. The last thing is that the Berachos Yosef brings down that if a person is davening in a shul that is not knowing to say it, is he allowed to say it afterwards? So he certainly can, according to Berachos Yosef, but Rav Yashav actually holds, and it's brought down, that it's only a chiyuv on a tzibor, and therefore that person should not say it afterwards. But anyway, you see clearly from the Yerushalmi that was their minhag Yerushalayim to say it, which is interesting that the Gra followed that minhag. Anyway, very interesting. So I hope that was interesting to you, and we see that there's just so much there. Last Mara Makom is, if you look at Bavli Brachos stuff, Yudal and Aleph, the top toast is a very long one, but it's about making a bracha on Hallel. You'll see that he literally addresses all this Gemara Yerushalmi. And if you want to kind of get a geschmack for how Rishonim, looked at the Yerushalmi and quoted it, and he talks about all these ha'aras that, you see clearly from the Gemara that they did say Hallel, and they said it with a bracha. Otherwise, how could someone not notice that they were saying it and making a bracha? Ayin Sham, you'll see it's very geschmack, and once you know the sugya here, then it brings it more to life as well. Wishing everybody a great day.